Welcome, good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you may be. This is Mark Hunsaker coming to you from the Kimber Leadership Academy of North Idaho podcast. I've been asked to guest host, and I'm proud to do so. Our guest today is Dr. Glenn Kimber. Dr. Kimber is a very noted constitutional scholar in the country and also a well-respected educator. Dr. Kimber has a background that is varied. He has lectured in 50 states and 40 countries on the Constitution of the United States, its founding and constitutional principles. What brought him to this point begins, I think, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in 1970. You had kind of an Epiphanies year. You want to tell us about that?
Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm so good. It ought to be illegal.
It was in 1970, Mark, when I came back from Vietnam. That was a real eye-opener for me. For the time I was in Vietnam, I knew there was a lot of opposition to the war back in America. But I didn't realize there was so much opposition to us soldiers that were fighting over there. And when I came back in 1970, I was really shocked to see what was happening here in America. I was really in love with America, but I was confused. We had people rioting. We had people burning the flag. They were doing all kinds of things and yet saying they were doing it because they loved America. And I wondered, how can you burn a city and loot the neighborhood and say you're doing it because you love America?
Yeah.
And over the next 18 months, you'll remember, we set about 128 cities on fire here in our country in 18 months. And I would talk to those that were in protest, and many of them had black armbands on, and they would put their hands up in a clenched salute, a communist salute, and I would say, what are you against? And they'd say, the system. I said, well, what is it? What's the system? What's the establishment? What is it? They didn't know.
Right.
And I said, what are you going to replace it with? We don't know, but anything is better than what we've got. And now you got to appreciate what it was like in the 50s that entered in the 60s and then the 70s compared to now.
Yeah.
That cry for we're against the establishment and anything's better than what we've got has been every election since in the 70s. But when I came back and found that, I was confused. I had married Cleon Skousen's oldest daughter, Julianne. I married really well.
Married up like a lot of us.
She didn't get much, but I really did. And I said to my father-in-law, I said, Dad, I'm confused. I want to know what's happening in America. And he said, now you'll be a better student. Because if you don't know how to ask questions, you'll never recognize answers.
Right.
And so he was kind enough over the next numbers of years to be able to take me through the educational process to see what was happening. And what really shook me was watching the Olympics. And when a player was getting the gold medal for having won, and they were playing the Star-Spangled Banner, the athlete would have his hand in the air in a clenched communist salute, a black armband down, and his head down in mockery of the Star-Spangled Banner. And Dr. Skousen said, now remember, people tend to behave according to what they believe. Mm-hmm. He said your belief mechanism is what creates your action mechanism. And if you believed like they believe, you'd act like they do.
Right.
And I said, I would never I would never burn the flag. I would never do that. And he said, yes, you would if you believe like they do. Now remember, he said, if you could get them to believe like you do, they'll act like you. I want you to know that was, for me back then, that was I don't know. I don't know if you can ever, I just do not know. Little did I realize then that I would be a friend of one of the former leaders of the Black Panthers, Eldridge Cleaver. Mm-hmm. And I watched him go from a communist, activist, terrorist type of a thing, 180-degree turn. And I watched him go on television and say, if I'd have known when I was younger what I know now about the American founding fathers and what they believed, I would have never been an atheist, and I'd never been a communist.
Right.
But I didn't know. And into my mind came Dr. Skousen's great counsel. You have tendency to behave according to what you believe. And he had never been taught about America and about the founder. And when I came back from Vietnam, I said, wow, I remember I was of the generation they took the civics class out of high school. They took American history away and replaced it with social studies.
Right.
You never went for my siblings had gone to school and spent a year and a half studying the Constitution and its application. I think I spent a week.
Yeah.
Maybe it was 2. I can't remember it.
Right.
And so now I was of a generation coming back from Vietnam that did not know the Constitution. But I loved America. And as I go around the country now, I will ask the people, how many of you love America? Like it did in our audience last night,
Right,
you noticed.
right.
Every hand goes up. How many of you love the Founding Fathers? How many hands went up last night? Everybody.
Yeah.
How many love the Constitution? Every hand went up.
Yeah.
How many believe it was inspired? Every hand went up. How many articles are there in it? All of a sudden the hands are down and we start over. You love the Constitution, believe it's inspired? All right. How many articles are there? I thought it was interesting that a particular candidate was asked that question, and he says, well, I defend the Constitution, the First Amendment, the Second, all of them up to the 12th. And you have to smile and you say, sir, how many articles are there?
Right.
And so over the period of time, we have lost the knowledge of the Constitution, but not the love of it.
Right.
Even protesters protest with the authority of the Constitution. Did you notice that?
It allows them to, and they
Sure.
fight it, but they're
Yeah.
allowed to do what they're doing.
Not if you believe the Constitution. See, the Constitution does not give you the right to be breaking laws.
Right.
You have the right for peaceful assembly,
Right.
not riots.
Right.
But they won't do that and say, well, I have my constitutional rights. They don't know the Constitution either.
Not to destroy things.
Do they?
Right.
And so it's been a very, very fascinating. But anyway, that launched me on that 1970s, coming back from Vietnam and on watching us as a people destroying so much. And I said to my sweet wife, I'm in the wrong profession. I'd gotten my bachelor's degree in accounting and economics. I wanted to be an accountant. I knew I'd never have any money of my own, but I wanted to count somebody's.
Right.
And I said to my wife, it's the wrong profession for me. I want to go into history. I want to go in and study the Founding Fathers. I want to study the Constitution. Then I want to promote it all over the country. Because I believe as a people, we're down on what we're not up on.
Right.
And we weren't up on America. We had been told the Founding Fathers were immoral, they were evil, they were degenerate, the Constitution was obsolete, it doesn't apply anymore, it was for a bunch of farmers on the East Coast 200 years ago. You've heard that,
Right.
haven't you?
All of it.
And,
Yep.
and it doesn't apply today. And I said, how do you know? You haven't read it.
What part doesn't apply?
Yeah. Yeah, name me specific.
Right.
I was on a radio program, a major radio program a few years ago, and the interviewer was a great attorney, well known. And we had a caller called in, and he says, I'm a professor of constitutional studies. It's an insult to think that the Constitution even applies today. And the announcer looked at me, and we're on the radio, so he couldn't see the expression, and I could see the expression on his face, and he was thinking, where do we go with this one? And so I said to the person calling, I said, Professor, obviously you have more knowledge than I have, so would it be okay if you were my mentor for a few minutes and I was your student? And he says, of course. And I said, sir, help me please. In the Constitution itself, please share with me in Article 1, what is obsolete specifically in Article 1? And I was waiting for an answer. And he says, well, I can't think of anything specifically. And I said, in Article 2, specifically, in Article 2, what's obsolete? I went all the way, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I almost asked him for 8, because there isn't 8.
Right.
But I wanted to see if it ever read it. But I didn't want to be on that one.
He was probably waiting for you to get to 12.
Yeah. and so I just went back to Article 1, Section 8 that talks about the 20 powers that the federal government is to have and nothing more.
Right.
And I went, was there anything in Article 1, Section 8? Well, not good. And the announcer by this time was frustrated. And he just simply took a look at the microphone now as though he's talking to the fellow. And he said, can't you name any incy beansy teensy weeny part to it? I just burst out laughing. I hadn't heard that expression for years. Well, not that I can make specifically. And the announcer says, well, if it works, don't fix it. And click, hung up on him. He pushed the button, and now we're listening to music and an advertisement for a little bit. But my experience has been very similar to that over and over and over again.
People just don't know.
No, because we have ceased studying it. And so I decided to go on back to school, finish a master's degree in education, etc., and then get a doctorate in constitutional studies, which I did. And when I studied the Founding Fathers, they warned us, if you take religion, morality, and patriotism out of the classroom, the culture of your country can collapse in one generation.
Right. Start with the youth.
Yeah. And I thought, wow, wasn't it Abraham Lincoln that said that the curriculum used in the schools in one generation will become the basis of their laws for the next generation? And so I wondered about Lincoln's conversation and his counsel. And so by going back and studying the Founding Fathers, I said, wow, then I need to go back and get another doctorate and do my dissertation on the history of education. Because I was watching, wow, we had gone in my lifetime, in 1957, America led the world educationally. Within 10 years, we were 14th on the industrialized nations, and within another 10 years, we were the bottom among the industrialized nations. And I said, you don't go from top to bottom by chance.
Right.
Who's directing it and why? And so I went back and got a second doctorate and used as my dissertation the story of education from the Founding Fathers down to now. Oh, was that an eye-opener. Now I could see why we needed to set up a new educational program for the students. Now I could see that you had to go back into the educational arena, make sure you had religion, morality, and patriotism in every subject so that the students had a reason to remember what they were studying.
Right.
And so that's when we started into the private school movement. And we couldn't find curriculum, and that because for a number of years, since 1957, we had taken religion and morality and patriotism out of the classrooms.
And this is the heart of the Kimber Leadership Academy methodology, if you will, is to weave in God and to weave in the Constitution and our founding and its divinity into every subject, not just civics.
Every one. Because this is what the Founding Fathers trained us on. You go back and study them. And, I mean, can you imagine the Commander-in-Chief saying, do not allow somebody that does not believe in God to be in politics or in military because their oath won't mean anything.
Right.
Now, I asked various people running for political office, what does the oath of office mean to you? And they look at me and they're not even sure what oath of office they're going to take. And so it's been a fun experience. But Mark, it's been an exciting one because I wondered if you're putting religion, morality, and patriotism into every subject, are they still getting the subject?
Right.
And the other students who are just focusing on the subject and not the other material, are they so far advanced from you? And so we did the studies on thousands of students in 17 states and found that when you add religion, morality, and patriotism into the classroom, the students move 3 times as fast academically.
Yeah.
Because there's reason in their mind for what they're learning.
There's purpose and there's a foundation to attach it to.
Yeah, when I first finished college years ago and was teaching algebra in the high school age, I was teaching college algebra. There was no application, but it was manipulation of numbers.
Right.
And the students would get an A out of my class, and they could manipulate numbers. They couldn't balance a checkbook.
Right.
They had no idea what to do with interest rates. They knew nothing about that, but they could manipulate numbers.
Right.
But when we added the religion, morality, and the patriotism, the students excelled. And all of a sudden, I kept making the requirements for graduation higher and higher and higher and higher. Now to graduate from our school, they have to be able to take a GED diagnostic test that instead of testing in 7 subjects, it breaks it into 22. And they have to get, in addition to the academics area of the test, where they have to have completed in the test all 22 subjects and perform as high as a freshman in college or higher in all 22 subjects.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
It's astounding, and it brings me back to our seminar the other night, and it's something you said that kind of blew me out of my chair, is the percentage of Kimber Leadership Academy graduates who go on to do greater things in college.
Yeah, that would thrilled me, because when we started adding this, and people were saying, well, especially guys, were saying, well, man, is this going to make my kids weird? Will they be able to compete in the real world?
Right.
I mean, we'd ask that, don't we, Mark? And then we asked the question, boy, is it worth the money? But we're finding that the students, of extremely high percentage of students, over 80% of the graduates, are going to college. There's no other program like that happening. And when they get to college, having written their thesis, where from memory, they've had to write 4,000 facts in history from memory, and then write it into a publishable book form. Mm-hmm. And I had one of the presidents of one of the major universities. He said, we don't require that from anybody.
Right.
And I said, what I do to get into school. And do you know how old our average graduating senior is? 15 and a half.
Oh, my gosh.
Average. We've had students as young as 13 and 14 who are going into their college work, being able to finish a bachelor's degree by the time they're 18, 19 years of age. I mean, it's just amazing and thrilling watching. Not because we are geniuses, it's because they are.
Yeah.
The kids nowadays have a capacity to learn that's thrilling. And when they have a reason to remember, they have a tremendous ability to remember. And if I had to do those kind of things to graduate, I'd still be in school trying to get out.
That myself as well.
My generation. But the other thing that I love, Mark, today is they love America. And when you teach them the Founding Fathers and what it was all about and that whole thing, and show how it was inspired by the Creator, the whole Constitution, how it applies today, and why.
Yeah.
And we show them, we take the 150 major problems we have in America today and show them how every one were caused by our abandonment of the Constitution. These kids go out and love America. It's thrilling to watch them. They're optimistic, not pessimistic. You don't find them, oh, it's going to collapse and the economy's collapsing and the nation. You're not hearing that from them because you know what they're saying? We're going to keep it from collapsing. We're going to build it. We'll do it.
Right.
I love that positive attitude. That was evident last night, you noticed.
Oh my
So
gosh,
when
yeah.
it was positive, notice the whole audience. Oh, they're so glad that somebody loves America still.
Oh, and I think we all took courage and faith when you said your background and your history, and you're saying, I'm more hopeful now than I've ever been.
Yeah, I've been involved
the
in this since
success of-
1970, for
Yeah.
goodness, and I'm more optimistic than I have been in any of the years.
Mm-hmm.
And I've studied in depth, and I've watched the politics. I know what happens. I know what the amendments have done to destroy the constitutional principles. I know that. I know
Right.
where we are. And the thrilling thing these young people grasp and get is, wow, if this is what is done to destroy and take us down, then let's reverse it and restore the Constitution.
I'm glad you mentioned that because it brought me around to what you said last night about there's 4 areas that we need to focus on now. You mentioned in Vietnam you're not a fan of bullets, and I put down here ballots, not bullets, and what we can do about voting and the 4 areas that we need to focus on. Can you go over those?
I would glad to, Mark. Thank you, and I appreciate your mentioning that my philosophy is the God of heaven did not establish the first free people in modern times to see us being destroyed. And I believe very strongly that we can use the ballot box in the healing of America and don't have to use the bullet box in shooting everybody. I mean, there's a difference, is there not?
Very much.
And so various scholars of the past and tremendous patriots have watched this happen. See, we've watched this decline like this in the lifespan of one generation.
Yeah.
And we notice that there are 4 things that we must do. 1, we have to look to the heavens as the source of our freedom, not government. If we look to government for the source of our freedom and definition of our inalienable rights, we lose both.
Right.
We have to look to the heavens for that. And without the help of the heavens, we will never be able to restore America. See, once you gather that concept, and then once the youth feel that and see it and understand it, now they have to act like, perform like, and vote to please the heavens, not a political party.
Right.
So their loyalty becomes to their Creator, and whoa, that is a marvelous, marvelous difference.
Mm-hmm.
Then number 2, we've got to make quality family life our high priority, not the occupational life. There's a big difference in government.
Yeah.
That if you're protecting the family will then build the community. Unlike some people that believe that the community is what raises the family.
Oh my gosh.
You have to understand it's the family that builds the community.
Right.
And so quality family life must be a high priority. Number 3, we've got to understand the Constitution itself. We've got to study the Constitution from the viewpoint of the founding fathers, not the viewpoint of a Supreme Court, not the viewpoint, because they're going around in circles, you
Right.
know, and not the viewpoint of some law school, but to find out about the founding fathers. And when the heavens inspired the founding fathers, wow, that gives great credence to their opinions and what they did and why.
Right.
And so we've got to study the Constitution from their point of view. We've got to know there are not 12 articles in the Constitution. and number 4, we've got to be involved. And again, we turn to the scriptures to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
When the master said on one occasion, watching the people on this side and that side, etc., he said, you know, I'd rather have you hot or cold than lukewarm.
Right.
Because when you're lukewarm, I can't use you.
You're useless.
Yeah. And I had a religious leader a number of years ago. He said, we're going to keep going down as a nation and keep going down, 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 not because of the wicked acts of some groups, but because of the apathy of good people.
Right.
For if we are apathetic as a people, the heavens are not justified in blessing us. If we want a king, we vote for a king. We vote for a king, we get one. See, that's the story of Samuel, Saul.
Right.
Yeah. And you go back and you say, where are we today? What are we working with today? Yeah. Give me the power. Give me the power. I want the power. And I would love to have a politician stand up. And we've had a few that have done it that are no longer in the race. But stand up and say the number one thing is restore the Constitution so we can protect our families. Mm-hmm. We can protect our churches. We can protect that which matters. And then government can grow on a moral base. Wow.
What a concept.
So there's the four. You look to the heavens as your source of freedom. Mm-hmm. You have quality family life as a high priority. You study the Constitution from the viewpoint of the founders, and then you get involved doing something in healing your community and healing your nation.
I'm reminded of a couple of different quotes. One of them talks about, if people want to be saved in ignorance, they want what never can be and never will be.
Yeah, that sounds like Jefferson, doesn't it?
Yeah, you have to educate yourself.
Yeah.
And we talked about separating out God and morality from education. Yeah. And I'm reminded also of, you've got a lot of knowledge, but do you have any wisdom? Because knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in fruit salad.
There's a lot of truth to that. And what you're talking about is, notice, in order for us to know how to perform in our more elderly years, mm-hmm. we've got to learn it in our younger years. Yep. Isn't that interesting? And so enemies of freedom know that. So when the first thing they did that I was able to show in my dissertation on my degree in education is that individuals who wanted to destroy the Constitution and take us from that position to it's obsolete, etc., came back into the schools. And I don't think they even knew what Lincoln warned us about on that. Yeah. And they took religion, morality, patriotism out. And all of a sudden we started hearing Jefferson was immoral. Washington had immoral relationships.
Right.
Franklin had 14 illegitimate children. On and on. And that one of the things I said to myself, who made up those lies? And how much money were they paid? All that is now documented. Millions and millions and millions of dollars were spent making up those false accusations. We know who the father of the children were of Hemings. It was not Thomas Jefferson.
Right.
There was not a Millie that even lived next door to Washington. Franklin didn't have illegitimate children. They were all made up lies. But when you put it into the school setting for the students to hear, now they're hearing about all this kind of activity.
Right.
They'd get two messages. One, you can't have an inspired Constitution if these are the kind of leaders.
Right.
Two, these are the kind of standards that leaders can have and still be good politicians. So you don't have to be a moral person to be a good politician.
Right.
Isn't that an interesting psychology? And it breaks my heart. Because when we started working with our young people and giving them the documentation, because that was one of the things that was interesting, because they were going home to their parents and saying to the mom and dad, look what I learned about the Founding Fathers. The parents were saying, where did you get that? Because when I was going to school, I was told that the Founding Fathers were this and that, see. Mm-hmm. So we had to give good documentation to the students as what we were teaching them so it would be acceptable also for the families.
Yeah.
And when the students have been going through that kind of a school, oh my goodness. And so we're so thrilled with these young people going to the Kimber Leadership Academies and that. And so very, very pleased with this new one up here now in Coeur d'Alene that they're now starting. That is so fun because as they become involved in this, they love America. They love their families. They have confidence in their Creator. Mm-hmm. And they want to be leadership, not fellowship.
Yeah.
And it's fun to watch kids not looking to fit in. I don't know if I want to fit into a godless society. They want to stand out. They want to do something. And I'm saying, hallelujah.
Yeah.
And so we used to be just Kimber Academy, and parents have said, we've watched our kids. It needs to be called the Kimber Leadership Academy because these kids want to be leaders and want to reach out. I mean, it's just thrilling.
They want to share what they've got.
Yeah, and you noticed last night, you have a former student stands up there, and he said, let me tell you what I do. I love the founding father. Wasn't that fun?
Oh, it was awesome.
And so that's what we're doing up here.
Is awesome. I love that. I love the fact that we're weaving morality and religion back into education for the kids. I know that especially in the Coeur d'Alene and North Idaho area, there's a great contingent of patriots and people who crave constitutional information.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we're getting the academy up here so that we have a place to go that we can actually learn in depth what the Constitution is and why it is.
And isn't that fun? I was fun watching last night when I asked the question of all of you that were there last night. How many of you love America? You noticed the hands did not go up just to the ear.
They touched
I mean,
the
they
ceiling.
went clear to the top, didn't they?
Yeah.
And the people in Coeur d'Alene, the people around here, all over America are feeling this. They love America, but they're frustrated because they don't know what to do.
Right.
And their frustration is because education has been taken out as to how to heal America and maintain what they want and that type.
Now, there are the Academy, we talked a little bit last night about upcoming seminars that will be offered through the Academy on a Saturday day basis where it can be convenient and affordable for people who work all week to come to. Do you want to kind of go over step by step the 4 basic seminars to understand it?
Yes, thank you. Mark, one of the things that we found as we were going through this is that we needed to put together an organization to teach the Constitution to all ages, not just in the school, but about all ages. And so we organized the Thomas Jefferson Center for Constitutional Restoration. And what we do with that one is we do seminars on the Constitution itself. We have a seminar that teaches all about God's hand in the building of America, so people can go back and see about the founding of this land and how important it was. It was fascinating that Washington would write to Congress 67 times showing how without the heavens' involvement, he could not have won.
Right.
67 times. And we teach all about God's hand in the building of America. Then we have a seminar that we go all day Saturday on the Constitution itself from the viewpoint of the Founding Fathers. We go through the preamble. We only go through 7 articles on the Constitution. And then we do, of course, the preamble to the Bill of Rights and the Bill of Rights and then Amendments 11 through 27. And we get a chance to understand the Constitution from the viewpoint of the Founding Fathers.
And the intent.
Yes, which is very important. Then the 3rd seminar, we talk about who wanted to change it and why. What happened? How did we get where we are? And we go through all that documentation. People are just blown away. And we do it not so we will dislike people involved, because if we believed like they believe, we would have done what they did. And so, but it's so that we can see how we got where we are. And then seminar number 4, we spend a Saturday going through, and we go through the 39 things we need to do to heal America. That we can heal America in 3 to 4 years. I mean, heal America. We can eliminate the entire national debt without raising a penny taxes. We can see the whole healing as we return to the Founding Fathers. And so with that, our academies host those presentations.
Right.
So the Kimber Leadership Academy here in Coeur d'Alene will start inviting the Thomas Jefferson Center to come in and teach those seminars, so that we'll be doing them on Saturday once a month, and the people of the community will be able to come, and our students will be assistants in that presentation.
That's awesome.
And they will teach part of it. I look forward to having some of the young ladies who were there last night. I thought, oh, wow, I would love them to stand up and give a 30-minute presentation as part of our God's Hand in the Building of America.
Right.
For example, we'll have one of them stand up and say, "Hi, I'm Joan of Arc. Some of you have heard of me, but not many of you know me. So let me tell you about myself."
Right.
And now they'll go into the documentation we've been able to get. We've been able to get tremendous materials from the Catholic Church and from the various writers and people from that time to know her story. And to have a young lady present that first person, the audiences go, "Wow."
Yeah.
And the student that performs it has a whole different feeling.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, and I've always been told that if you want to know a subject, you learn about it and then you teach it. And after you've taught it, it roots in your heart.
Yeah. That's why the founder said that knowledge is only yours as you give it away.
Yeah.
And the more you give it away, the more it's yours.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? And somebody stand up and saying, "Hi, I'm George Washington. A lot of you have heard of me, and some of you think you know me, but let me tell you who I am."
Yeah.
Now, you get a teenager standing up there and giving his story first person. Oh, or Walter Knott. Oh, my goodness. I looked at one young man last night and I thought, oh, if he were to give Walter Knott. Yeah, I mean, how many people have ever heard the story of that great man and what he did? He weighed over 340 pounds. And if it hadn't been for him, we would have never been able to launch properly in what happened in Boston. But having the youth tell those stories as part of the presentations, isn't that fun?
That is. That's awesome. I know my daughter did like a Hiawatha research in grade school. So to have the founding fathers and to have these great unsung heroes, these patriots that hardly anybody really knows about, is fantastic. That people, it resurrects them in the hearts and the minds of people, and they're like, "I never knew that."
Yeah.
For years, I never knew there was more writers than just Paul Revere.
Yeah.
There were way more writers than just Paul Revere.
And why did he have to borrow Deacon Larson's horse to go in the first place? What law was there that prevented him from having his own horse?
Right.
I mean, none of that, you see, is part of our history anymore.
Yeah.
And so America's happened, but all we know nowadays as most citizens is that it happened.
Yeah.
But we have no idea where. And in a spirit of ignorance, you add anger that builds hate.
Yep.
Without correct principles. It creates a country that is looking for riots. It's looking for shooting of police. It's looking for every aspect to trying to solve the feelings of bewilderment.
They've lost so much hope and faith that fear takes over and blocks their mental process, so they can't reason anymore.
And that's sad. And I don't want that to happen to my kids. I don't want it to happen to my grandkids. Now I don't want it to happen to my great-grandkids. And so we have to set up these kinds of academies. Not because people who are teachers in the schools, public school system, are bad people. They're not. But the materials that they're forced to teach.
Right.
They can't have prayer in school anymore.
Yeah.
Very seldom do they use the Pledge of Allegiance. And to be able to give a presentation on Washington being so discouraged at Valley Forge that he goes down into a wooded area and prays. And some of his men hear him. And when you talk about the prayer, what he was praying, what it was, the involvement of the Creator, 67 times he writes letters.
Yeah.
See, without the heavens, we don't win. The kids need that, or they don't feel hope today because they see what's happening today, and they see just that which is bleak. They see Washington when at Valley Forge was so bleak, but then they are able to see how the heavens intervenes to his prayers and the people, and they win. Our young people need to see that America can win. Their lives can be good lives. There's a reason to get married and have children.
Look forward to the future.
Look forward. Oh, I want that with all the young people.
I appreciated your remarks the other evening, and I myself have been looking for hope. And in the current political climate, It's a little hard to find because there is such a misinformation campaign of who does what to who and why and where.
Yeah.
And I took courage in the words you said, and I see a bright hope on the horizon, and the bright hope is our young people who we need to raise up to be the next leaders,
Yes.
to be the rescuers, if you will, of the Constitution. It looks like I'm pretty much out of time. I would love for this to go on for another 30, 40 minutes. I've got tons more questions. We're going to have to save those for another day. The final question that I kind of want to close with, and I've always been raised that if you pray for generalities, the Lord answers with generalities, but if you pray specifically for something, the Lord can answer you specifically. Now, I've been praying for God's blessings to be upon the country and for the right things to happen and the prayers of the righteous to be answered. In today's current political climate, with the choices that need to be made, what, in your experience, should we be praying for?
That is a very, very good question. And like you say, we could go for a couple of hours on
Just
that.
on that.
But let me tell you what I share with our young people at all of our academies throughout the country. Okay? I'll say, young people, the God of heaven needs you to be his hands. What you need to be praying for is, Heavenly Father, what do you want me to do? What can I do in the fight for freedom? And use that inspiration and go forward. And often, very often, students will come and say, wow, this is interesting. Well, first, I got a very strong feeling that I can be positive. I also got the feeling I need to start with education.
Right.
So I will know what to teach, what to do. Then I know to reach out. Because if I'm reaching out with education, then we can use the ballot box in the proper selection. And not you have to use the bullet box
Right.
to force the freedom's message.
Yeah.
And so as I'm watching the young people and they're saying, all right, I can do it just like the young man last night that spoke. He's standing up as a college student. And he talked about, remember, 4 years ago I became involved in this, and now I love America, and now I know what I want to do, and I want to be able to reach out to people. I want to be able to do that. And I thought, wow, into my mind came the very message of Holy Scripture. That's the pattern. Paul, you've been fighting on the wrong side. Change your education and move forward, and the Lord will provide your path of influence. That's what we need.
That is. More prayer, more focused prayer, and more studies. That kind of wraps up our time here today on the podcast. I thank you all for listening. If you check the links below, you can get a hold of the Kimber Leadership Academy in North Idaho and rooted in Coeur d'Alene. They'd be happy to give you some more information and answer any other questions. Also, we have links below to contact the Thomas Jefferson Center for Constitutional Restoration, and you can contact them. They also will be able to give you more information. We hope to come to you at a future date, and while you're waiting, remember, God bless America.
In the fight for freedom. And use that inspiration and go forward. And often, very often, students will come and say, wow, this is interesting. Well, first, I got a very strong feeling that I can be positive. I also got the feeling I need to start with education.
Right.
So I will know what to teach, what to do. Then I know to reach out. Because if I'm reaching out with education, then we can use the ballot box in the proper selection. And not you have to use the bullet box
Right.
to force the freedom's message.
Yeah.
And so as I'm watching the young people and they're saying, all right, I can do it just like the young man last night that spoke. He's standing up as a college student. And he talked about, remember, 4 years ago I became involved in this, and now I love America, and now I know what I want to do, and I want to be able to reach out to people. I want to be able to do that. And I thought, wow, into my mind came the very message of Holy Scripture. That's the pattern. Saul, Paul, you've been fighting on the wrong side. Change your education and move forward, and the Lord will provide your path of influence. That's what we need.
That is. More prayer, more focused prayer, and more studies. That kind of wraps up our time here today on the podcast. I thank you all for listening. If you check the links below, you can get a hold of the Kimber Leadership Academy in North Idaho, rooted in Coeur d'Alene. They'd be happy to give you some more information and answer any other questions. Also, we have links below to contact the Thomas Jefferson Center for Constitutional Restoration, and you can contact them. They also will be able to give you more information. We hope to come to you at a future date, and while you're waiting, remember, God bless America. We hope to come to you at a future date, and while you're waiting, remember, God bless America.